Well, hello. Hi, everybody. Megan here, the faithful fibromyalgia warrior. And you know what? I feel amazing today. I feel fantastic. I feel incredibly inspired. I feel full of faith. I feel full of joy. And the amazing thing is that nothing has actually changed in my life. It hasn't. I've not suddenly gotten rid of all my symptoms. I've not suddenly had all my chronic pain disappear. Nothing. Nothing has changed. But what I've come to understand is with God, so much can change just in our mindset and our attitude. Today, I spent a good part of this morning listening to inspiring worship songs or hymns and just reading a bit of the scriptures. But it was more than that. It was just this pure gratitude for the life that I have. Now, I will say that obviously there's a whole bunch of factors that go into it, right? And for me, the most important thing is walking with God. Now, if you are not somebody who is a Christian or who believes in the God of Jesus, I hope this is still helpful. I hope this is still something that can be useful for you because that's why I do this to help anybody who wants help, who might need help, who might need hope, who might need inspiration. And for me, the biggest thing I think when I was finally ready to find God and understand what that meant to have a personal relationship with Him, that was a game changer for me because I had to accept that there was more than just me in the world. Like there was something bigger than me. And I think part of me always believed that there was something bigger. And I figured there must have been like God was somewhere out there, but that, he wasn't overly involved in my everyday life. And so I could kind of believe he was out there and not have to change anything about myself. And nobody likes to change, right? Whether we choose to worship Buddha or one of the many Hindu gods, whether we are Muslim, whether we are Sikh, whether we are Jewish, whether we are Catholic or atheist or Pentecostal or Baptist, whatever traditions we have, however we honor our gods, we all have one thing in common, and we've accepted that there is something greater than us that exists. Now, some of you may not even have that, but what I like to say is I like to borrow something that is said in the 12 step rooms. And that is that we need to realize that if we are trying to change something in our lives, that we've been unable to by our own will, that we need something to believe in that's greater than us, that can help anchor us. And that is what they call to follow the God of your own understanding, whatever you see as your higher power. So for some people, that's Mother Nature. As I say, one of the other gods of the different religions that are out there. For me, it is the God of creation, the God of Jesus. And when I stop to think how amazing my life is, I know this might sound silly. It might sound crazy even. But although my chronic pain is there, although I still have inflammation, although I don't expect it to just suddenly go away. But when I'm feeling so full of faith and gratitude and joy, you know what? I don't even notice it. I was out today. I treated myself to breakfast out. I had a couple of poached eggs, a little bit of bacon, and then later I got a bit of sausage, and it was great. And I sat and had a really nice cappuccino, and I just felt overwhelmed with so much joy and gratitude for my life. And I am absolutely convinced, and I completely believe that it is God. He is the cornerstone. That for me, that It might be something else for you, but for me, it is God who created the world. It is God, the Father of Jesus. And so to listen to some amazing, beautiful, inspiring songs and just to feel like I was floating all day, this joy, nothing has changed. Like, we still have to pay rent. We still owe money each month for our utilities. And it's not like we suddenly inherited £1 million or anything like that. And yet I feel so incredible. But I also know that I would never, ever have gotten to this place if God had not led me to eat the way He intended for all humans to eat. And that is eating the animals of the world. He created the animals to feed us. They were given to us to be our nutrition. He created the world, and the plants came first. Well, there was sky and land, and then light and dark, and there were the seas and the lakes and the rivers and the oceans and all of that. Then the plants came next, and even scientists would say this is the order in which things happen. The lands formed, the seas formed, the plants came next, then came the animals, then came the birds. And when we came, we were given authority over all of that. We were given authority over all the animals and all of the plants. Plants can be really helpful for medicinal purposes. Plants without man-made chemicals in them, like cocoa butter and jojoba oil and all these extracts and essentials, oils can be extremely beneficial for our health to cure things like eczema or help heal minor wounds and cuts and scrapes instead of some sort of a prescription. Doesn't mean we should be eating them, but that doesn't mean we can't use them at all. For example, I do not eat oats. Don't eat them because they're very inflammatory for me and for a lot of people. So I don't eat oats. However, oats, the shampoo we use for our dogs has got oatmeal in it because both our dogs, their skin can tend to get very dry and itchy. And when we use the shampoo with oats in it, it calms the skin down. Just like I remember as a kid, when I had chicken pox, my mom would make an oatmeal bath. Why? Because it's soothing. So there's no issue with using the plants for those reasons. Some people maybe tolerate eating them. I don't. But that doesn't mean they can't be used to help us, just that we probably shouldn't eat them. But it was absolutely God who helped me discover the carnivore diet. Absolutely did. And I've shared this in many other videos and live streams. But for a very long period of time, I thought I knew better than he did, right? I thought I knew best. Due to some massive issues that were happening with our old church at the time, we had to decide to stop attending. We didn't stop believing that God was there, but we stopped going to that church. Which, by the way, just because you leave a church, as long as you are still faithful and practicing your faith, you are still a Christian, you are still saved. So leaving a church fellowship does not mean you have left God. And that is actually one of the things that our old church used to teach, which was one of the reasons why we stopped going. Now, at that point, I still had faith in God, but what I found that my faith got very frail and very weak. It never went away fully, but it was certainly not what it had been when I first became a Christian in 1993. And I thought I knew best. Therefore, everything had to be done the way I wanted it. And since I figured I was the only person who could do stuff the right way, like whether it was laundry or dishes or housework or raising the kids, I had to have control of everything. And eventually I had control of nothing. Um, Fast forward to 2014, and I was taking laundry out of the dryer at our house in Norwich, here in England. We live in England. But in case if you're new here, if you're wondering why I have an accent that does not sound English, that is because both my husband and I are Canadian born and raised, and our boys are both born in Canada. But we moved here to England when they were age 6 and 9. And that was 13 and a half years ago. Now, our 19-year-old has since moved back to Canada, where he works as a chef. And our 22-year-old is still here looking for work. But that's kind of what's happening with that. So while they may have developed a bit of an English accent, we did not, because we grew up in Canada. But what I came to find is that when I had that, what happened is, as I was saying, I was taking laundry from the dryer, where you kind of bend over and you twist and you pull stuff out. Well, I did that. And when I went to stand up, I couldn't. I was stuck, kind of like this. I literally could not straighten up any further than that, because the disc between my L4 and L5 vertebrae, so at the bottom of my lumbar area of my spine, right down by right down near where my tailbone and sacroiliac are, the disc prolapsed, meaning it bulged out. And although it wasn't enough for them to have to operate, it was enough for them to say that I had it was irritating the spinal nerve, and that I would have to not work out. I would have to avoid any lifting of anything heavy of any kind. In fact, I should avoid lifting things in general, at least for the next 6 weeks to 2 months. So I was forced to give up control. I couldn't do the vacuuming. I couldn't do the mopping. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do the housework. Couldn't do all the cooking like I once did. In fact, I actually had to ask for help. I had to ask for help, and that was hard for me. Now, at that point, I kept asking myself, why? Why is this happening to me? Why me? And it took me a couple months to realize, well, why not me? Why not? There was never any promise from God that we would avoid, that we were going to avoid any sort of challenge in our lives. There was no promise that we would avoid pain. There was no promises whatsoever that hard things like this would not happen. In fact, life was never promised to be fair. And I realized, well, why not me? Why not? And so through various attempts at relieving the pain, none of which were effective, I ended up having my anxieties flare. I had even less reliance and trust in God. I was trying to rely on myself, which, what am I going to do? Nothing, right? Who am I? I'm nobody. But I thought I had it all figured out, and I was going to be just fine. And I would make things fit no matter what it took. And I was stubborn, and I was prideful. And it took me 17 years of trying to do it all by myself, of which 6 of those years were with debilitating pain and injury and fibromyalgia and overwhelming, binging, purging, restricting, guilt-ridden cycles. And it was awful. But I've thought, this is my fate. This must be a punishment because I did something wrong. And I didn't realize at that point that no, God was just trying to test me. He was trying to help me be ready so that he could use me, so that he could work in my life. But because I had been so stubborn and I had refused to rely on him, to surrender anything, there was no way I was going to surrender this in prayer because nope, I've got to be completely stressed and anxious and worried and all of that. I got to do all that. It's all me. And I had faith that okay, it's going to work out somehow. And then that was it. I didn't pray to ask God, show me how it's going to work out or help me to be open, help me to be surrendered, help me to allow God work. I didn't do any of that. I just plowed ahead and just figured, well, okay, he's working somehow. I don't know how, but he's working, and eventually maybe it'll be for something good. Now I'm thankful because it's brought me to this point, and I realize I would not be here if I had not gone through everything else. And I'm grateful that, first of all, God is outside of time. So while 17 years is crazy long to me, to God, it's nothing. It's just a blink of an eye. But he waited. He was patient, and he was waiting for me to come back to him with an open and humble heart, where my faith that had become frail could be strengthened. And he knew I had to reach the point where there was nothing, I could do nothing, and I had to accept I could do nothing. And that came after, so in March of 2020, right before lockdown, I had already been told that my LDL cholesterol was abnormally high in October of 2019. And I also found out from my own lab results that my thyroid was not functioning as it should have been. It was not functioning optimally. So from what I can understand, how it's supposed to work is when your TSH levels, so your thyroid stimulating hormones, when those levels get to be on the lower end, that is supposed to signal the thyroid to say, hey, wait a minute, we need more of the thyroid hormones of the T4 produced because we need to get more of them converted into T3, which then goes on and works with your reproductive hormones, with your metabolism, and all sorts of other stuff like that. Those are the two key ones that I know about, right? And I knew that it was underperforming since about 2017. But nobody would listen to me because my TSH levels were considered to be within normal range, even though my T4 levels were not even on the range itself. They were below the lower end of acceptable. So in 2019, right, my TSH levels were at 0.9 MIUs per liter. Okay, which was in range, but the T4 was underproducing. So the range that is considered acceptable here in the UK is between 12 and 22 parts, or I think it's parts per mol, PMOL per liter. And so 12 is the absolute lowest of acceptable. And my T4 measurements after my blood work was done was 11.7. But I was told, nah, it doesn't really mean anything. Don't worry about it. So the other thing I have to say is that the other worrying thing was that my triglycerides in October of 2019 were at 4.31 millimoles per liter, and the acceptable range is 0.3 to 2.3 at the most. I was double what the most what the higher end was. Like that's how bad I was already entering the start of fatty liver disease, and all because I didn't realize that eating 5 or 6 pieces of fruit a day was bad for me. I mean, along with things like whole wheat toast with peanut butter and jam, and obviously cookies and treats now and then. But I didn't know that that was the problem. I had no idea. And so it would seem as though it was slowly building up over time. Um, it wasn't like it just happened overnight, you know? So here I am being told, well, your triglycerides are way too high. You've now, your liver's in distress. You're starting fatty liver disease. Holy crap. Now what do I do? And, they put me on statins for my LDL because they were worried about that, which is whatever, not a big deal. Um, Needless to say that since I went carnivore in July of 2020, um, up until August of 2021, which is the last time I had any blood work done, but my triglycerides had gone all the way down to 1.85 millimoles per liter. And the maximum, they say, is 3 millimoles per liter. So, and 2 is ideal. So I wasn't even just ideal, I was just below that. So those are under control because of being carnivore, cutting out all the fruit, all the plants, and all the crap, right? But I didn't know that at the time. I honestly thought that when I went and saw the lipid specialist in March of 2020, that what else is going on, right? I was already on statins. I had already started statins for my cholesterol, for my LDLs. And she said that, you know what? The the triglycerides at that point were still, they were lower than the 4.83, but they were still above what was deemed an acceptable norm or acceptable range. And so she said that the statins were not going to reduce it by anything else, and that I would have to cut back on fruit, watch my carb intake, and oh, by the way, you have hypothyroidism. My thyroid was not functioning, and I was put on a thyroid hormone replacement drug. Now, at low levels, thankfully, and they're now back up where they should be. But here I was dealing with being told I had cholesterol issues, even though I was eating I was eating low fat, and I was eating all my fruits and veg like I was told to, and I was eating all the healthy grains like I was told I was supposed to, having no clue that that was contributing significantly to the high LDL cholesterol, and even more importantly, the extremely high triglycerides, double what the maximum accepted amount was, right? And even then, I didn't turn back. I didn't turn to God. I still figured I could work. I could think my way out of this. I could make myself get out of this somehow. I'd already given up on ever having any relief from my chronic pain. When I first hurt my back in March of 2014, my first thought was, it must be my sciatic nerve, maybe. Okay. Friend of a friend said, hey, I've got this great osteopath, sort of like a chiropractor. He hurt his back. He said, this guy's great. He'll give you an adjustment and you'll be feeling much better. So I went. And of course, you have to pay for it. Not covered by the NHS, as in like most countries. So I went. He did an adjustment. He literally had to do this because the right side of my pelvic bone was higher than my left. And he was trying to even me back up, trying to basically snap me back into place, if you will. I saw him twice. I saw him the first time, and then I saw him again a week later. And I did all the exercises just like I was told, and the pain in my lower back would not go away. So I tried osteopathy. I tried massage therapy twice, and I tried physiotherapy and hydrotherapy. And an occupational health specialist came in and tried to help work with me, and raise my chair up a certain way and give me foot rest and all that sort of thing. And yet the pain in my lower back would not go away. Um, and then finally, I was sent for an MRI, and the doctor then finally confirmed that, oh, yes, your disc it has bulged out to the side on your right hand side. That's the bump you're feeling. I could feel it. I still feel it, just not as pronounced. And I'd just given up that this was my life. I was going to be in horrific stabbing pain all the time, and I would never be able to lose weight or fat. I would just probably keep getting bigger. I might as well accept it. And I felt like I was losing my mind as my brain filled with fog, because I also had been confirmed as of December of 2015, I had fibromyalgia. Makes sense. And that was it. Nobody had any real solutions. Nobody had any real plans. They had a few ideas of, well, try this, see if it helps, try that, maybe it'll help. But nobody really had anything they could offer that was going to be helpful. And even at that point, when my husband kept hoping, oh, maybe this will help fix it, I was like, no, there's no fix. You can relieve the symptoms sometimes, or if you're lucky, you can get rid of the symptoms. But if you do one thing wrong, it's right back again. It's not a cure. That's why it's a chronic condition, right? So having to deal with all of that right up until 2019, cholesterol issues. Oh, gotta go see the specialist. Oh, yes, by the way, you have an underactive thyroid, which is causing you a lot of problems. It's affecting your metabolism. It's probably affecting hormones and levels and your cycles each month and a bunch of other things, because they all work together. And so even though she put me on the hormones as a medication, fine, but I was still anxious. I was still, bloated and in constant abdominal pain and constipated. And I, felt like I was hungry, but I felt like the food was always right here, caught in my throat. There wasn't anything there, but that was just how I felt. Brain fog, like my head was a giant hot air balloon that somebody filled up. And I could kind of hear what people were saying around me, but I couldn't retain any of it. That was my life. And I was then definitely dealing with depression and anxiety, especially anxiety, because this was my life. Well, this sucks. I had no desire to do anything. I had to stop wearing jeans, and I had to stop wearing tights and anything with a zipper and anything that was even remotely tight around my waist, because it would bother my back. So I lived in leggings that were usually a size or two too big, men's socks, because otherwise it felt like my feet, the circulation was being cut off, and oversized baggy tops, hoping that I was hiding all the weight that was going on. And of course I wasn't. And I felt worse, and I felt self-conscious, and I felt ashamed. And even then, I had not yet got humble enough to turn to God and say, God, I don't know what to do here. I feel miserable. I have two great kids. I have a loving husband, but I felt awful all the time. No energy and absolutely zero desire to do anything. Pretty much. I felt embarrassed and ashamed going anywhere in public because of how much weight I had put on. But I I just figured, well, I can't help it. I have an underactive thyroid. I'm not changing what I eat. It's my thyroid. And that was definitely a big part of it. But again, I was also eating all the things that I thought were healthy that were, in fact, not at all, which I didn't know. And I'm so grateful that, excuse me, I went through all of those things because I would never be able to appreciate where I've gotten to now without it. And I don't wish, it's not that I wish COVID, and it's not like I'm saying, oh, I'm so glad we had COVID. No, I'm not saying that. But since it happened out of COVID, I was able to get back my relationship with God because everybody had to stop. Everybody, the world stopped. We all started to rethink and reprioritize what really matters right now. What's the most important thing? And what I came to realize was that what mattered most of all was I wanted to make sure that if for some reason I died because of COVID, I wanted to be absolutely sure that I was okay with God, that I was going to make my way to heaven. And I knew, I'd known for a few years that I really wanted to be able to connect more with God. And for me, I was just so exhausted all the time. And I had such a massive balloon of fog around my head and around my brain that I just felt like I couldn't do it. And when my husband and I started to try paleo, and yeah, it was a disaster for me, but I felt that, that quiet voice we often hear in our head sometimes, which for me, that's the Holy Spirit. Some people say it's your subconscious, whatever you want to call it. It's telling me look into keto, and that's where I started, and that's how I started my pathway to carnivore. I'd already cut out gluten and sugar and dairy for 2 weeks, and so going to keto was a lot easier. And as I was letting myself eat bacon and eggs, things I would never have eaten in the past, unless it was, turkey bacon or some sort of fake eggs, I felt the nourishment hit my system. And I realized this is what my physical body had been crying out for, was real nutrition, real healthy, healing foods. And I just remember one day I saw a video by Dr. Ken Berry, and he was talking about how if you want to be carnivore and you don't have a lot of money, then you find the meat that you enjoy and that you can afford. And he said, and that's absolutely fine, because is it as ideal as grass-fed, grass-finished beef? No, but is it far better than the processed crap and seed oils that are out there? Absolutely. And that inspired me because initially I thought, how are we going to afford for me to go carnivore? It's too expensive. Until I realized it didn't have to be. And I just remember one day, again, must be the Holy Spirit, but whispering in my head, ground beef, fry up ground beef. And that was it. And that was it for me. Once I had that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Because I love beef burgers, like the patties. And then you add in some bacon and a bit of egg or maybe a bit of cheese. Awesomeness. And I quickly found, as I was eating the animal products, the meat, the egg yolks, the bacon, some sausage, a bit of lamb, and I was trying liver at that point as well. When I was eating parts of the animal, I realized I was cutting off the supply of fog in my brain. So brain fog feeds on seed oils, processed crap, refined sugar, carbohydrates, feeds on it. And when I cut that stuff out, all of a sudden the brain fog went because I had nothing to feed on. And I was clear in my mind. And I mean, I felt great then, emotionally. And a few weeks later, I suddenly woke up one day and realized, wow, you know what? I don't feel so sore today. I feel as though my medication is actually helping me as opposed to not having any effect at all. And it was amazing for me to see the weight come off. I will not pretend it wasn't because I was 80 pounds overweight. I'm down to I think 120 pounds now. Uh, Something like I think that's 54 kilograms ish. Well, by the time I was ready to start something different, by the time I was ready to start paleo at the end of May, I was just over 200 pounds, which is what I weighed during my second pregnancy just before my younger son was born. I was not pregnant. I had no excuse. Um, you know, and the bulimia, so the patterns of bulimia and binging and purging and restricting and fear of food, that didn't all just disappear overnight. It definitely lessened, but the more meat I ate, the more I learned how to really listen to when I was hungry and when I was satiated, made a huge difference because I knew in my mind I was nourishing the body like God made, that I was taking care of the body that the spirit lives in. And that's what God asks us to do is he wants us to treat our bodies as temples. Yes, all things are permissible. Not all things are beneficial. So will I hold judgment if somebody wants to eat a donut? No, that's your choice. I won't because it has no benefit to me. And in fact, it causes me nothing but inflammation and pain. So I won't eat it for that reason. Not because it's evil. Food isn't evil. It's just food. But if I'm putting in stuff that is not going to help my body to heal and be healthy, that makes no sense, right? That would be like if you have a severe allergy to peanuts, well, you're not going to eat a peanut butter bar. That'll kill you, right? Not saying I have extreme allergies or anything, but if my body isn't feeling nourished by the food going in my mouth, then what's the point of food? Because the point of food is to nourish us and provide us with fuel for energy so we can get about our days. And if it's not doing that, then what's the purpose, right? From my point of view, that is. But when I finally went zero carb, and I have a video. Oh, hello, Moy. Nice to see you there. Um, I think I made the post like 2.5 years ago, and it's so true that I felt so much pain relief, and my mind was clear. And in my heart, I had been wanting to get back to God, to find a community of believers once again, to connect personally and deeply every day. And I had my brain back. I got my brain back. When I got all the other garbage and crap out of my diet, I got my brain back. And I just remember how amazing it felt emotionally to learn how to, really pray and connect and be inspired by whether it's music or a sermon or just another person, just to see God working through my life and in someone else's life. And it was amazing. And we were part of an online community of faith with other Christians out of Ottawa in Canada during COVID. But in 2021, we knew here, at least, our government said that they were going to start easing back restrictions. So we started to join in on some of the midweek lessons with the church we go to now in East London, because really it would be impractical to think that, if Ottawa eventually comes out of lockdown and they're going to have live services. Oh, hello. Oh, from Bangalore. Wow. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining in. I'm 50 myself. Be 51 in August of this year. But that was a game changer for me. And I never looked back. And I have felt so grateful that I found a way of eating that is healthy, that honors God, that honors my body and the planet. I just like to share about it. This is my experience. And the thing is that once I was starting to lose weight, okay, once I started losing weight, I found myself, now I started to lose some weight while I was keto, okay, about 30 pounds. And that was a shock to me. I'd never lost that much weight at once ever in my life. And I couldn't quite believe it. But at the time when I was keto, I was tracking my macros like constantly, and it was becoming an obsession for me. It was becoming an idol for me. And I knew in my head and in my heart, I didn't want that. I didn't want that at all. That was really bad, and it was going to lead me back towards compulsive eating and restricting. And so when I started to hear people talking about a carnivore diet on YouTube, I looked into it, and I thought, well, I barely eat any carbs of any kind to begin with, other than a little bit of milk or cream in my coffee. Okay, let me try this. And it was great because I didn't have to track anything. That was the thing I loved so much about going to carnivores. I did not have to track anything. Eating fattier cuts of meat, whether that's beef or lamb or pork. For some people, it's poultry or fish. Now, I prefer beef, as you will know if you've been here before. If you've watched any of my other videos, I prefer beef. I love the taste of beef. It's easy to come by. I get 20% fat beef, and sometimes when it's in stock, I'll get 23% fat beef, and lots of bacon and egg yolks. That's my go-to almost all the time. Every now and then, I'll switch it up. I might have some doner meat, just not the kebab itself, and not the bread part itself, just the meat. Sometimes I'll have a shawarma, just the meat. Or if we go out, I might have steak or maybe some burger, and obviously just not have the bun. But I seem to do better with higher fat beef. I find it far more satiating. If it's too lean, it just makes me feel hungry and I have to eat more of it, which I don't want. So that's me anyways. Beef, so mince and yolks and bacon. Which reminds me, now would be the perfect time for the song. Again, I give full tribute to Bart Kay because I came up with this song after I heard his song about steak and eggs. That's what inspired me to do this. So here we go. Mince and yolks and mince and yolks. That's what I like to eat. And bacon. Yolks and mince and yolks and mince. That's what I really enjoy. And bacon. There we go. I'm waiting to get a record deal any day now. No, seriously, I'm not. So it's like 13 degrees Celsius outside today. Wow, it's amazing. So warm out. So I was so glad to finally get my relationship back with God. I asked someone I trust who happens to be a minister's wife, and she and I talked through some things. I said, what is involved for me to get back my relationship with God? Because it's been so weak and frail. I never stopped having faith or believing in him, but I did not rely on him. And I've been trying to do it my way for 17 years, and that has not worked out very well. So What's involved? Do I have to do do I have to do a whole bunch of studies? Do I have to study the Bible again? What happens? And she simply said, no. If you never lost faith in God, if you've never fully turned away from him, then all you need to do is you need to be open with him. If there is sin that you still need to repent of, that you've not confessed, do that and start praying again. And because I said, well, how will I know if I'm restored back to God? She said, look, that is something between you and God alone. No one else can tell you when your relationship has been renewed with God except for you, because you'll know. And I know it sounds mysterious, but she was right. And so we spent a few weeks just having some prayer time together. And I realized how amazing it felt to actually pray more than just thank you, God, for this day. Please look after my family was about literally all I could come up with back then because I was so full of brain fog. That's it. I couldn't hold a decent conversation with anybody, let alone with God. And then I was reminded that, you know what is so cool? Being a Christian, loving God, worshiping Him in prayer or song or study, it's not a formula. God is not an algorithm. He is simply God. And I was so grateful for the weight loss and the fat loss, for the reduction of pain and inflammation, and most importantly, my brain fog cleared away. And I got my mind back, which I thought was gone for good. That, that is what inspired me. That's what makes me so very grateful to talk about God and also all the blessings I have because I've found the way of eating that He's intended for us all along. You know, animals were created on this earth as a source of nourishment. Now, if we can find ways to use all the parts of the animal, even better. So there's no waste, whether it's the animal skins for clothing or whatever it might be, you know, the bones formed into, I don't know, utensils, possibly hunting devices, weapons of some kind. Great. The organs, whether some humans ate them sometimes, whether they were fed to their animals, their live, you know, like their dogs or their livestock. Great. But all parts were used, all parts were important, and all parts were designed for us to eat. And what I've come to learn, and I do not have the science behind all this, so I am only commenting on what I've learned from the experts, like Professor Bart Kay. Amazing. If you have not followed him or watched him before, you should. Also, an incredible young woman of great faith who has a really, really good channel is Rebecca Heichman at Tailored Keto Health. And what I've learned is probably the better meats to eat are beef and lamb or any animal that is a ruminant like goats or deer, zebra, I suppose, antelope, gazelle, depending on where you are in the world, those are the best to eat because like lamb, sheep, mutton, because they, as ruminant animals, have multiple stomach chambers, which means when they eat all the grasses and the cereals and the grains that are in the field, their stomachs are able to break them down completely. And whatever does not come out of them as waste gets converted into the skeletal muscle mass, as well as the fats in their body and helps strengthen the organs and just their overall beings. But mainly it goes to converts into the muscle meat that we can have, the skeletal muscle meat that we can then eat with the fat included. Whereas the animals that we eat that are not have not been created with multi-chambered stomachs, like pigs and all birds, whatever they eat, some of it ends up in the meat that we eat later because they're not able to fully digest and use it. So if you're really sensitive to that type of thing, you may find that you have a sensitivity to when you eat pork or chicken or turkey because of what they've been fed. Some of what they've been fed will end up in the meat as opposed to being completely broken down like a ruminant animal does. So I don't eat chicken simply because I don't find it filling enough. I really don't. I find it's quite dry, and there is even if you're doing chicken wings, for me, I don't do well with seasons or spices or sauces, and plain chicken wings are boring. Let's just be honest, and there's very little meat on them. So that's me personally. If you eat them and you love them and you're okay and you feel full, please eat them. Same goes for drumsticks and legs and thighs. If you enjoy them and you love them, go for it. Seriously, enjoy. It's not for me to say don't eat them. I'm just saying I don't eat it because I feel it isn't satisfying enough for me. And the same thing with pork. I can enjoy bacon, no issue. And I have bacon in the morning and I have bacon in the evenings. A couple of pieces of bacon, so maybe four in a day. And I sprinkle that over top of my mince and egg yolk mixture. I enjoy bacon. However, if I eat more than three at a time, I get flushed. And I find that if I'm eating sausages or any other kind of pork, that I get flushed and blotchy, and my skin even gets itchy sometimes. And that's probably because of what they're fed, which is like corn and soy and other stuff, right? So again, if people, and plus those things are higher in polyunsaturated fats, which are not ideal for the human body. So you can have it. I mean, hey, if you like bacon and you do well and you enjoy it, have it. Go for it. I certainly do. But of all the things I eat, it's just a small portion. The majority of what goes on my plate is the beef. And for me, I know I don't have to worry. It's sort of like I got to beef. I don't mind lamb, but lamb is expensive. And I enjoy the taste of beef much more personally. I made sirloin steaks yesterday, and I can only eat a small portion because, as delicious as it is, for me, it's too lean. So I don't eat a lot of steak. I'll eat it sometimes, but I don't eat a lot of it just because it's not fatty enough for me to feel satiated. That's just me. Um, but that's what I eat. But when I was reading back through Genesis chapter 1 and then again in Genesis chapter 9, and God made it pretty clear that the animals were made for us to eat. And there's a reason, because it nourishes us. I mean, anthropological studies and the isotope studies have shown conclusively that humans, as long as we've been around and we've been humans, have consumed for the majority of our diets for a very long time animal meats. And it was only since the agricultural revolution, which was just before the time of Jesus, when that started to change. And maybe it's because, the wealthy and the elite always had meat. And it was the poor people who got, the grains that they figured out how to turn into flour and make breads with, because it was all they had to avoid complete starvation. But that doesn't mean, and even then, sorry, I should say, even then, these were breads that were probably baked fresh every day or every other day. They weren't made with processed flours and grains and then preservatives to stay on a shelf in a grocery store for up to a week. So Even then, if you were having a little bit of bread, it wouldn't be as big a deal because it wouldn't have all the additives like today's bread does. Um, but I don't believe that God's intention was that we would eat nothing but plants. Because if that was the case, then animals would not exist, right? And even though we might have to slaughter the animal to become our food, we can still do it with respect. And that's, I love the fact we go to a local butcher's, they have their own cows, they have their own pigs, they have their own chickens, and they are a regenerative they practice regenerative farming, which means they do it in a way that the animals are treated with care and kindness. They make use of every part of the animals. There's no waste. And they are allowed to graze freely. So you're not getting additives and crap in their diet, which I think is really important. And I personally do not eat any plants because I can't. The exception would be drinking it in the form of coffee, because of course the coffee bean is a plant. But I would say that there's zero carbs in it, there's no starch in it, of course, and it is processed and put through such rigors at such high heat that most of the anti-nutrients are removed when you roast them, and then of course you pour hot steaming boiling water over the top of them. That's what I understand. Doesn't mean there aren't still some negative things that come with them, but hey, that's not why I feel so joyful. I feel so joyful because I know God is in my life. I feel so joyful because I still have pain in my lower back, and it's been bothering me for the last few days. But I have been so very blessed and so incredibly looked after by God. I can barely even notice it sometimes. I feel like something amazing is going to happen soon. I'm not saying I'm going to do it. I'm not saying it's going to be for me, but God continues to work in incredible ways. My older son, who has autism, but he's very high functioning, he is currently studying the Bible. He wants to become a Christian. That's amazing. And he does. He understands these concepts, and he'll write out his thoughts, and then he and I will have this really great spiritual conversation. That's amazing. And you know what? If I was who I was 3 years ago, I would never have had the time to listen. I wouldn't have. I would not have had the patience or the time to listen. And yet, I'm actually able to hold great conversations with him. That to me is a blessing. I am glad that I got rid of all that extra fat on my body, because it was doing me no good. It was setting me up for heart disease, type 2 diabetes. I already had the beginning of a fatty liver. I was headed for the ending of my life, like so many of my extended family members, and I didn't want that. So I'm thankful that eating a carnivorous way, the way humans have for millennia, and the way God has intended for us to eat, I'm grateful that I do that. I'm so, so glad. But I'm even gladder that I'm turning and going, wow, you know what? God is with me. No, he really is. He's really with me. I feel so much joy today. And, it's nice to have somebody all the way from Bangalore. And I know that there's someone out there that comes in regularly from, um, from Taiwan. And I've got somebody who jumps in every now and then from Sweden. And I've got a couple of people from the States. And who am I? I'm nobody. But it's amazing how many people I've had the chance to chat with or get to meet because I finally got smart enough to realize I was not smart and I needed God. End of. I needed God, and I will never look back. I was I was out of the fellowship for almost 17 years, wanting fellowship. But we didn't have this sort of technology. I mean, it was 2003 when this happened. We didn't have this technology then. And so I had to wait for God's timing, and God had to wait for me to be in just the right place and just the right mind. I think I needed to get to the place where I was finally broken and humble enough to say, my way is not working. I need to trust God here. And at that time, I just remember thinking, I can't, I cannot carry on feeling this much pain and agony and suffering. I can't do it. I can't. And I need something. And I wasn't even at that point, I don't think I was even willing to admit that I needed God. But I know that when paleo didn't work, I remember thinking, God, please help me find something. God, help me find a way to lose all this fat and weight and pain and just please help me. And that's when I had the thought of, oh, try keto. And when tracking my carb macros became too obsessive for me, when I found that I was making that my idol and I was being too focused on it and I was falling into old eating disorder habits and patterns, right then, I remember thinking, okay, God, I don't want to go here. I don't want to go back to this. I want to get past this. I want to be in recovery. Please help me. And that's when I saw videos about carnivore. And while I was going carnivore and trying to work through these other feelings, that was when my husband and I were both like, we want a faith community again, even if it's virtual. And we found Christians out of the Ottawa church online, made some new friends, some very good new friends. And it was through that, all of that process, where I was finally at the point of being humble enough to say, God, I don't want to go the opposite. I don't want to go the complete opposite. So for me, I do everything I do. It's got to be all or nothing from one end to the other. So, if I'm not worried because I'm becoming obese and I'm full of pain and suffering and I don't know what to do, it's either that or I'm obsessing because now I'm thin, but what if I get fat again? I have to control this. What about my food? What about this? What about that? One extreme to the other. And I did not want to go either way. And I knew that if I knew if it was up to me, I would. Thankfully, I had enough wisdom in me to go, yeah, you tried this for 17 years and you sucked at it and it didn't work. And you felt more miserable. I don't know how many times I tried to convince myself I'm not bulimic anymore until something stressful happened in my life. And then I fell right back into those patterns. Too many to count. And I didn't want that. But I also knew I didn't quite know how to get past it. And so when I spoke with this woman from the Ottawa church, he was amazing. Melanie Singh. She's married to Tony Singh. They lead the church. She was incredible and had changed a lot as well in the 17 years since I'd last seen them. And I remember her words of, a cookie's not evil. But if it triggers you to be obsessed, whether it's with gaining weight or trying to lose weight or having those negative thoughts about yourself, then it has a negative effect that can be evil, because then you're no longer focusing on what God has given you. And she said, but at the end of the day, it's just a cookie, or it's just an apple, or it's just whatever. And I remember that. Not, hey, you got to just pray more. Well, you just don't have enough faith. That's all. Just have more faith, you'll be fine. But she listened and she gave me such great advice. And so, in spite of my anxiety, in spite of my fears, in spite of my binging and purging and restricting and recycling and everything that went on, I realized I would never ever be able to recover from any of that until I put God first in my life once again. And she helped me realize it wasn't an impossible thing to do, that all I had to do was just start by talking to God as a friend. That's what he wants. He wants a personal relationship with us. He wants a friendship with us. And I felt a bit weird. I'm not going to lie. I felt a bit weird saying, "Hi, God, it's me here. And I'm sorry it's been such a long time." And then I ended up talking with God for almost an hour. But I felt a connection and a hope sprang in my heart that I had not felt in years. And so now, today, 2.5 years later, I have the best health I've had in my life. Yes, I still have fibromyalgia. Yes, I still have IBS and Raynaud's, and I still have anxiety and depression. But you know what? My anxiety, almost completely gone. My depression, I've had no symptoms in months. None. Because I'm faithful and praying and relying on God. Yes, that's part of it. But I'm keeping all the inflammatory and crap processed food or garbage out of my body. And that's made a huge difference too. And so for me, it's got to be both things. And I feel like I'm closer to God now than I was when I first became a Christian. And that's amazing to me. I'm my husband and I have been married now almost 25 years. Our sons are both adults. They're grown. One's out of the house, and one's hoping to find work soon and wants to move out eventually. Life is still going on. I still have chronic pain, but I'm so grateful and so overwhelmed with gratitude for God waiting for me to finally smarten up and go, "Hey, let's try it your way," because my way didn't work very well at all. I was eating crap to deal with my problems. But the problem is with that is the problems were still there, but I was eating the crap, but the problems didn't go away. As Go Keto with Casey likes to say, if hunger is not the problem, food is not the solution. And no matter what we tell ourselves, like, "Oh, I'm just going to have this cake because I deserve it," or "It was a tough day," or "I wanted a treat," whatever it is. And I'm not saying this with judgment, but the thing is, go ahead if you want to eat it. It's your free will. You can do that. But when you eat it, whatever it is that you are trying to forget or change or not stress over or resolve, that's not going to happen just because you eat the one thing, right? So that's what I had to learn. And I could not eat my way out of my problems. I could not restrict my way. I could not binge and purge my way out of my problems. I could not take on the problems of the world because I couldn't solve them anyways. But when I stopped and I started to return to God and faith, wow, even if nothing changed, I could still have joy and that peace that goes beyond all understanding. It's there. It is there. Anyways, guys, I hope this is encouraging to you all. I really do. That's it for me for today. I hope to be back tomorrow. We'll see how the day goes, but I hope you guys are well. I hope you guys are doing great. And thank you guys for sticking around. Thank you guys for checking out my stuff. And I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.